Hey guys, this is Danny. Welcome back to Drambo Midi sequencing in AUM for Koalas. This is part 3.2, and I'm going to talk about parameter locking, or PLocks. Now, what you can see on the screen here are some different tools that I've created, which you can grab from the description below. I'll talk about how I set them up at the end. It's kind of not specifically relevant to parameter locking, but they are tools that will allow you to do different things in AUM. So just starting from, let's say, the volume knobs. So basically, by default, when you load up AUM and start creating channels, you've got channel 2, 3, 4. I created the MIDI channel before I created the others. So the first audio channel is channel 2. And you'll see by default, I'm just going to show you here so I can get rid of it while I'm here. If you go to channel controls, the volume is automatically MIDI mapped to the channel up to 16, which relates to the actual channel that you're looking at. And it's always CC7 for volume by default. So I'm just going to get rid of this because I don't want what I'm doing to accidentally affect my headset volume, my microphone volume. However, what you'll see is here that each one has got, this has got channel 2, this one's got channel 3, etc., etc. So the only bit of mapping that I did before starting this video was that I connected Drambo to the MIDI control, which means that changes in here, one won't affect because there's no channel 1, but channel 2, channel 3, and channel 4 as an example. Okay, so these are knobs that I've created that under the hood it's going to look a bit like a nightmare, but basically every knob is going to a separate CC generator, and that is going individually to a MIDI channel 1 through 16, and then when you go into compact mode, which you can access by clicking the name, you can go into in and out of compact mode here too, but it's these little arrows on the top right of the box. I've set it up to just hide everything that you don't need to see. This differs from the MIDI rack, which I created for just general CC stuff, which is a lot simpler because this is just a CC generator. The only difference here is that it's got a MIDI output inside of it. So if you ever want these 8 controls or 9 controls or 10, 11, 12 controls to go out of a different MIDI channel for whatever reason, you can just open the box, change that number here, and it will send to a different output. So that means that you can have multiple copies of this, set this one to output 2, close, and then if you see here, I've got, if I clear this, this is going to channel, it's going to channel 1 and 2. So what's happening here is that it's passing through here. So what we need to do is actually disconnect this from the MIDI input. This input is what I need to disconnect. So yeah, that was it. So under the knobs, there's the MIDI input here. I will resave these without these auto mapped. I don't know if that will save the mapping, but if you're finding that changing 1 will actually send both 1 and 2, because this was set up here. Yeah, so this you double tap and then disconnect. Same here, this doesn't really need to be connected. So you disconnect that, close those. Now you'll see that this knob here does channel 1, this does channel 2, and these are just going to CC 1 to 9. This I just added before, but it doesn't need to be here. I double tap and then remove. So I just set them up by double tapping, same as I did in the other video. and setting the CC number to 1 through 9, but you can set it to anything, and you can set it to an external channel. Now, I haven't actually got to p-locking yet. So what p-locking is it allows you to use a sequencer, or using pattern level, it allows you to set a any parameter on a step of a pattern or on the pattern wide level. So if I was to add some sort of pattern here, it doesn't need to have notes, but if it's playing, the notes, if you just tap it, it adds notes. If you hold, then you see PLock Step appears at the top, and what that allows you to do is to then move any or all of the knobs. And what that will do is you'll see the little red dot. When I let go, it's got a little red indicator, and it's got a red dot at the top. And what that does is it sets the parameter, in this case, to mix the faders. So if I hold that, this is 2. Oh, interesting. Oh, it's because I had record on. So what I've actually done by having record on is recorded automation, which I'll get to in the next video. But parameter locking will let me just set that on a particular step. And whenever any other step happens, they'll reset. So basically, they're resetting to the default setting that is actually on the knobs. And what you can then do is just have, on this step I want it that much, on this step I want it this much, on that step I want it that much. And you can do that with Koala effects or anything else. So for example, if I was to add anything in here, so let's use the new LP HP filter. And what I want to do is set it to CC channel 1 CC1. So I'll click on that, click on here, amount, channel 1 CC1, close that. And now if I change this knob, you'll see that it's actually changing the LP and HP. And again, if I click on any step, I change it to a value, and then I change it to another value. Now, the problem is that that particular LP HP step I did on either side of other notes that are happening. So it's actually getting reset in between, and then it's getting put back to where it was. You see, it gets reset to 100, where I didn't actually set it to tell it to do that. So p-locking can get a little bit complicated, and it's, I mean, just like hard to follow, really. And the other problem with it is that it's always an on or an off. There's no fading in between this way. So just to show you, if I hold any of these steps, you'll see that the things that are p-locked highlight, and if you double tap them, you can get rid of the p-lock. So there's 2 ways to get rid of that. Either I drag up on this and then go over there and clear p-lock, or you do it individually by double tapping, or you can tap on a knob. You see that this has actually still got p-locks associated with it. If you double tap on this knob and go down, you can remove p-locks from the knob itself. So this red dot is indicating this p-lock, and now I'm back to square one with nothing automated. So the other thing you can do is do this on the sequence level. So basically, as you've got patterns here that go through pattern 1 and then pattern 2, if you hit a pattern, like the highlighted red one I'm going to hit, is saying p-lock clip. I haven't released my finger, but I'm going to reduce that. And then here I'll set this down here and let go. So what you'll see is that the red dot is appearing whenever the first sequence is playing. Now, I think this is probably a more useful way to use p-locks for automating between sequences. But obviously, you can't have transitions between those things. So what you can do is add in an automation, which you can have fades. It's a more graphical automation. Or you can modulate by adding modulators in some way here. But basically, they're the two ways to use PLocks. I'm just going to double tap that. The third thing, which is new in Drambo 2.0, I'm told, because I never really used Drambo much before this update, is if you go to modulator, you've got a morph modulator. So what this does is if you tap a sign, it's actually a parameter lock morph. So what I can do is I can turn this up, turn this down. Let me just double tap here and get rid of, no, in fact, so on the sequencer, double tapping doesn't work. You have to drag up on it and then you can clear PLocks. The other advantage of dragging up is you see that I can actually select, if I just tapped on a sequence to select it, it goes red, it selects the sequence and it actually changes the sequence that's currently playing. But if you drag up on a box, you see that it gets highlighted without being selected. So I'm still playing the sequence that's in track 1 and not track 2. So I can lock it to this. And the other thing you can do here is on this hamburger on the right, you can actually make editors follow song, which means that it's going to automatically go through the different editor steps. So that can be useful, especially for editing. But anyway, let's get back to morphing. Now, what morphing does is I've assigned these PLock positions, and let me just assign a few more, shall I? Not these ones because you can't see them, but I'll do these ones. Now, when I unassign, the PLock is stored in the morph unit. So that means that when I actually tweak the morph knob, it's going from its current unmodified state to the locked state. In fact, 0 is the current unmodified state, which is everything's on 100%. But as I go up, it brings it down. So if I go on track 2, I want to bring it down all the way. Like as its amount is 100%, you can see directly what's happening. But if I turn this right down, undo a sign, and then I can just automate a whole bunch of stuff just by changing this knob. Now, at that point, you can then have a parameter lock on the knob that is sequence based. So sequence 1 will be normal, sequence 2 will be the 100% morph. And also, you'll be able to add like actual automation graphs to the morph knob if you don't want to use parameter locking for that purpose. So it's quite handy if you can set up different states in various morph knobs for different things that you want to set up. So you get different setups, get them in a morph, and then you can just like mix them together. And morph actually lets you mix states. So I'm actually using two fingers, sorry, they're not buttons, they're digits, to mix the morph targets from various places. So you see that the line on, say, channel 1 and channel 2 here, you've got a pink line, which is morph 2, you've got a red line, which is morph 1, and the white line is what the current state is based on the mix of the two. So when they're off, it's going up to 100. So if 100, when it's off was in between them, you see that this one drags it down, this one drags it up, and if I put them both on, it just kind of mixes them together. So these morphs can then be automated. They can also be modulated. So if you stick an LFO onto this morph and then turn it up, you'll see that these are actually just like automatically going up and down. So there's a lot of things you can do. And then you can actually automate this instead of the morph if you want. So you can actually, let's get rid of this PLock here, and instead I'm going to PLock the LFO amount. So LFO affects it on sequence 2, it doesn't affect it on sequence 1, and the off state can be changed independently just by not using a PLock. So there are different ways of using PLocks. Another quite useful tool that I created with these things is, let me just quickly show you before ending the video. I created this, where am I? Midi rack, and then AUM Muter, which we were talking on the AUM, I was talking to G Bear and Michael Gerber about Mute Master, which lets you mute different states of things just with a button. And we were talking about how you might do that in Drambo. And so I created this rack, which is basically the same as the knob one. In fact, it has the 16 knob inside it. And the only difference is that each of these buttons is a modulator for the knobs. So when this is off, this is making 2 go down to its off state. When it's on, it creates, this makes it go up to its 100% state, which means if you then put this into compact mode, you've got 16 mute states, which you can, so if I just tap, let me try and get this both at the same time. If I tap 2, 3, and 4, they're either or on or off, but the nice thing is that you can then go into different sequences and say, let me shrink this. So let me get rid of, if I hold this and this is muted, hold that, this is muted, that is not muted, and then I'll add another sequence, and then, so I'm parameter locking which things I want muted and not muted at different states. So what you'll see is that as this now plays through, is going to highlight track 1, then track 2. It's muting the first track, then muting the second track, and then muting the first track and unmuting the first and second track. So basically, by using P-locking, you can create different states for, in this case, up to 16 different channels, whether they're on or off, on a sequence-based level. And just to show you something else, if I go to add a, let's say a 16 knob. Now, you'll see that I created sliders as well. The only thing with sliders is they're not modulatable. So I quickly went against the idea of using sliders. Like, this does work, but I can't actually modulate it, which meant that I couldn't do, you can't put an LFO on it, you can't do any of that stuff. So actually I've gone off using sliders. Instead I'm using just the knobs. So let's say 16 knobs. Now if I was to, let's say record some automation, and I record this up and down. Now you'll see, I'll go into this in more detail on the next video, but there's a little arrow in the bottom right of the sequences, and that means that there's automation happening. Now the thing is that this channel 2 automation here is kind of fighting the AUM Muter automation, and it is working, but then there are times where this, if I just add it over the entire sequence, so it's constantly moving. So you'll see that it's overriding the mutes that are happening in the muter. It's even when 2 is off, that it's still on. So I think just for clarity, what I would recommend is that you, with knobs, you have to drag up instead of double tapping them or tapping them to get rid of the automation. What I would do is, if you're going to automate a knob, just make sure that it's not being controlled by something else. It will just save you a headache as far as like fighting things are concerned. Now, if I was to PLock the sequence PLock 2 down in sequence 2, even though I've got automation going up and down, sequence level PLocks override automation. So basically, it seems that PLocks override everything, and automation gets blanked out by parameter locking, which it can be useful. It's just good to know. If you clear the PLock here, then you'll see that the thing continues to go up and down, as you would expect. So that's basically it. Basically, for parameter locking, it's useful for all sorts of things, effects, and volumes. And actually, like, it, as far as sequencing is concerned and controlling AUM volumes, I think that's actually a really useful use case for that. So grab the tools from the link below, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll talk about automation and how to edit automation. Thank you.